اللهم إنا نسألك خير هذه اليوم فتحه ونصره ونوره وبركته وهداه ونعوذ بك من شره وشر ما فيه وشر ما قبله وشر ما بعده. اللهم افتح علينا فتوح العارفين ووفقنا توفيق الصالحين وانفعنا اللهم بالقرآن وذكر الحكيم ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Alhamdulillah, I'd like to welcome everyone back once again for the study of the poem known as Tasheel Turuqat bi Nadm al-Waraqat of Imam al-Amriti, and the topic of Usul al-Fiqh, Islamic legal theory or foundation of Islamic jurisprudence, and this particular course being titled The Roots of Interpretative Disagreements. And one thing I observed when I looked at my lesson plan was that that I actually went a little bit ahead last week, and so this is part of the reason we didn't have a lot of time for question and answer. So that means we're actually like 1 week ahead, so which is not a problem. So I will sort of jump forward to that next lesson. So I would have to readjust the order of my lesson plan. But at any rate, in summary, to summarize what we've covered so far, in the study of this particular discipline, we study the sources of Islamic law and we study source indications. And we call the sources, or we call the source indications, adillah, evidences or proofs for, in this particular instance, for what we would deem to be the most likely judgment that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given about a particular thing. Then the area of Islamic law, Islamic jurisprudence, we're dealing with matters which do not give us definitive knowledge, rather it's matters that give us near certainty, al-dhann, at-fiqhu min bab al-dhunun, that we are in the realm of the speculative. And so in this realm of the speculative, we are trying to develop a process which is very logical, something which is reasonable, and most importantly, something that we think is built upon things, principles which are established by the revelation itself. So the Quran, the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And so that is one thing we have to be very cognizant of as we get involved with these type of discussions, and especially when we differ with one another. Now, we already know that sometimes the reason that the scholars differed was because they believe that certain particular statements or reports about the Prophet were not accurately or verifiably attributable to the Prophet ﷺ. Sometimes it was because they felt that one particular judgment may have abrogated another, among other things. And so sometimes the source of the misunderstanding or the disagreement is in the actual wording of the sources or the words of Scripture. That some types of statements are not open to interpretation, or they can only be understood in one way. Other types of statements have to be, they're ambiguous. They can be interpreted more than one way. So sometimes it happens because the actual expression. Sometimes the disagreement is a result of the individual, him or herself, who has misapprehended the reality of the expression, or has not understood the context of the word or the expression which is utilized in the Quran or in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So those things we need to always keep in mind. And this is why Imam Juwayni, he began in his particular text and followed by Imam Imriti in the order that he brought up these topics in this poem, is that he began by talking about the particular values of human behavior, or the particular judgments that are applied to human behavior, and then followed that up with a definition of what certain knowledge was, of what near certain knowledge was, what ignorance or the lack of knowledge was. Because different types of evidence will produce different types of conclusions. That some evidence will give us certain certainty of knowledge. Certain types of evidence will give us perhaps near certain certainty. Other evidence will simply leave us still in limbo. Right, we're still not able to know for certain, if it's this way or that way. But then at other times, we are just simply totally misunderstand or misapprehend the situation, totally distort, misconstrue the meaning of something based upon us not knowing the context, historical or cultural context that had led to a particular type of way that the word was to be applied or the expression was to be applied. So this is why when he started to talk about kalam or speech, because in particular, we are involved with the study of the divine discourse, which is kalam Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the hukum, the judgment that's given about the human actions according to the usuliyin, the scholars of this particular discipline, and the theologians. It is characterized as being khitab Allah, muta'allaq bil mukallaf bin mahithu anhu mukallaf. It is the address made by the Creator with respect to the actions of the legally responsible person, with respect to them being accountable for what they do or don't do. And so it's a khitab. It is an address. The hukm itself is khitab Allah, according to them. Whereas the fuqaha, the jurists, the hukm or the judgment that we get from the text is not the actual address itself. Rather, it is the what results or the byproduct of that. What the indications of that particular is. And that's a very minute issue. So don't have to really focus too much on that. But we are dealing in the area of kalam. And so kalam, according to linguists, is one thing. The linguists have their own understanding of kalam. And so anything that communicates an understanding, is considered to be speech. It's considered to be a type of a transmission of one's intent to another. That fundamentally is what speech is. However, when speech is not articulated clearly in such a way where we can dissect it, then we are more liable to make a mistake and misinterpret. So I don't know if the baby wants to eat or the baby wants to change the diaper. I don't know, but I take a guess at it. But when I actually have words that are and the meanings of those words are determined by a particular convention, a type of accord that happens between people, between human beings, and say, well, yes, all of us would say this is a cup. All of us say that this is a book, right? When we sort of develop sort of culture, our culture and our language develops that way, then it's more easy for us to settle upon a particular a definite or at least a near definite meaning regarding these issues. So he says that. So kalam. So since the Quran itself and the Prophet ﷺ spoke Arabic, that Arabic needs to be understood. It has to be studied. We need to understand what the constructs of that language are. That he mentioned that in the area of the study of Arabic language, we need to know first and foremost that words by themselves, a single word by itself, does not create understanding. It's not mufid. I could just say kitab, book, right? But what really is that asking from me? Is it asking anything of me? Yeah, kitab. I know that this is the name that I given to this particular item. But in order for something to be transferable, a type of meaning transferable from one of us to another in such a way that either I'm trying to describe something to you or I'm asking for you to respond to what I have to say, then I have to at least utilize two words. It says so kalam, and according to the grammarians, is either two nouns, or as a noun and a verb, or as either a verb and a particle, or it is a particle and a verb. So here. So these four basic forms of sentences which exist in the language. So he starts with that. We understand that the parts of speech are three. There's fi'l, there's ism, and harf. There's the noun, the verb, and there's a particle. And you have, when they put together, this is where it goes. Even when we say irkabu, if'alu, that the do or ride in the Arabic language, although in the Arabic language is only one word, but it's understood by the grammarians as two words. And so, because it's like if'alu antum, irkabu antum, so it's at least two words. But then when we get to that point, we understand that there's some words which are descriptive. We call it khabar, the akhbar. Something which is descriptive, something which is falsifiable. Something, if I say that, yes, Yusuf is 55 years old, right? I can falsify that, right? Yeah, it's true, right? 55 years old, right? So you have, yes, that certain types of sentences, some they're descriptive, and then there are others that are prescriptive, right? If I say, idribu Yusuf, right? Hit Yusuf, right? Now this is a prescription. I'm prescribing something for you. We call this insha, khabar, and then we have an insha, and as a talab, a type of request for one to do something. Ba'd zaman al-takallum, the way that you define an amr, that you request for someone to do something after the time that you make the statement. And then Imam Juwayni adds what's called istikhbar, which is another way to say istifham, inquiry, or sort of interrogative. And so the interrogative may take the form of a descriptive type of interrogative, where I say, or is Yusuf 55 years old, right? Or I may utilize a prescriptive type of sentence as well, and I might say, will you come into my house? Won't you come in, right? So I'm asking you to do something as well. So here, but in the context of istifham, and he gave some other examples of words outside of the two basic categories of either descriptive or prescriptive. He mentioned we call it the issue of tamanni, and so this is when we take a descriptive phrase, and it's nothing more than just simply an expression of a wish or desire that I have. Ala layta shababa ya'uda yawman fa ukhbirahu bima fa'ala mashibu. I wish that that youthfulness will return one day, and so that old age can tell him what happened. So and that is just simply, of course, a yearning, expression of one's desire of a thing which never will occur. So you use later. You have those type of expressions that have ard. It's a gentle request. Again, will you come in? Won't you? You're not going to come in. So you have that type of example in the Arabic language as well. In the area or an example of prescriptive. And then you have the qasam. There are certain types of expressions when you have here a combination between a harf and an ism, which is utilized as a rhetorical device to emphasize the truthfulness of something, or that the definitiveness of something that was going to be done. Wallahi, tallahi, billahi, la af'alanna. Yeah, I swear by God, right, that I'm going to do such and such, or I did such and such. So you have these examples as well. But the basic two categories of expressions or sentences are the prescriptive or the descriptive. Those are the two basic types of categories. And so we have to understand that to start with, because when we're reading the Quran or we're reading the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, we do have to ask ourselves, what type of expression is this? Is this the Prophet simply describing something, or is he prescribing something, right? And so, for instance, one of the issues that comes up often, every single year we have this come up with regard to the matter of moon sighting. We're going to go with the actual sighting, and we're going to do a calculation. And so one hadith of the Prophet, "Nahnu ummatun ummiyatun, la nahsibu wa la naktubu," that we are an unlettered nation, right? We don't write and we don't calculate. And so that particular hadith, is it simply khabar, or is it al-khabar al-murad bihi al-insha, right? It is a descriptive statement, but with the prescriptive indication, right? So some would argue that there it is, you're not supposed to do calculations. And the others say, no, it's just simply the Prophet is describing the state of the Arabs during their time. You see, that they were not a nation that utilize calculation in order to determine the start of their months. At any rate, these are things which are important for us to understand about this. But then there's also usage too. So you may find that a statement is prescriptive or descriptive, but then you have to ask yourself, well, does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or the Prophet ﷺ, when this was said, did they mean for me to take this literally or take it figuratively, right? So is this, am I to understand this the way that my people, in particular, say the Arabs understood it before Islam, or is I to understand it the way that the Muslims understand it, or is I to understand it the way the grammarians understand it, or am I understand it the way that the jurists understand it, or the theologians understand? You understand? So context itself often determines what the literal or the most appropriate, most presumed meaning of something may be. You see, so those things always have to we have to give consideration to as well. This begin is that what should I assume as be the most apparent meaning or intention of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when that word is utilized or when this expression is utilized? It's because the Arabs, one group of people, they understand it this way, another group of people, they understand it that way. Right, so that's another thing, So, and if I'm not utilizing it according to either of those conventions, then or am I to take it in a different way? So this is why all these things come up from the very beginning, and then today we come to a discussion of the awamir wa nawahi, commandments and prohibitions, and this is ultimately what we are seeking knowledge of. Is the awamir wa nawahi, and that whether it be from those statements which are prescriptive or those statements which are descriptive, that we're ultimately looking for the commandments and prohibitions. But then there's also as well, so some are prescriptive and descriptive. So in the area of the awamir and nawahi of commandments and prohibitions, that all of this, of course, is in the category of what? Descriptive or prescriptive? Prescriptive, right? That we assume that in the area of prescriptive, so if it's an amr, that the presumption that most people have is that it has to be indicative of something that God wants us to do, right? Or indicative of what God does not want us to do, right? However, when we look deeper into the issue, we'll find that even with the commandments and prohibition, it's not always the case that it's something God wants us to do or wants us not to do. Right, just as in similar we find that in the case of the descriptive statements, that akhbar is that they're sometimes just simply describing something like a story, something happened in the past, right? But in other cases, a description actually is to be taken or understood as a prescription, right, for the Muslims. So, for instance, in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about Banu Israel, right? And a lot of the different things that they did, right? And how they did things to gain Allah's wrath, right? Now, how are we to understand those verses? They're just nice stories, right? Or he talks about Pharaoh, and right? They're just nice stories. Or are we to take a lesson from them, right? فَاعْتَبِرُوا يَا أُولِي الْأَبْصَارِ, right? Take a lesson, analogize yourself with those people. Oh, people with eyes. Oh, you who reflect and have understanding. Analogize yourself from that. So this is what makes this discipline very, difficult for one to really claim certainty. Because understanding the way that the language works. See, because some people say, "Oh, it's pretty clear. It was a command. It means you have to do it. Clear as a prohibition. You have to do it." Not necessarily so. I mean, now for orthodoxy, for Islamic orthodoxy, or what has been the orthodox position historically, is that when there are indications which can be taken in a literal sense, or these indications have an apparent sort of connotation that we understand from them at first glance, then we are assumed that is the way Allah wants us to take them, unless there is indication that He does not want us to take them that way, right? Because, for instance, you find, like today, a lot of Muslims, who find it difficult to interpret certain problematic verses that are problematic for them in the modern context, they'll say, well, the verse can mean this, or it can mean that, and it can mean that, right? And because we want to appease, for instance, sometimes, ourselves, but then also others, to make, so we mitigate the sort of the violence or the sort of negative impression that many people may get from reading certain verses of the Quran or reading certain hadith. But those words often have original indications, right? And so for this reason, the scholars say, or the scholars of orthodoxy would say, asl fil kalam al haqiqa, that in other words, when a word has a figurative or literal connotation, that we are presumed that the word is understood in its literal sense, or the expression understood in its literal sense, unless it's impossible for us to take it literally, right? And then we will take it figuratively. Like, so for instance, when we talk about the Masih ad-Dajjal, the Antichrist, right? There are some people who want to, like, they're explaining that the Antichrist, is like, some system, or just all types of different interpretations that people have given to it, these sort of figurative and sort of allegorical interpretation to all of it. Yeah. But the hadith said that the Antichrist is a man, right? Right. And so there's some people, inshallah, there's some people who feel that, okay, no problem. Okay, thanks. I can close it. Thanks. Appreciate it. So some people, again, they just abandon the literal indication of it altogether. But there's no reason for us not to take it literally. There are hadith that talk about the Masih ad-Dajjal, talks about his parents, how old they will be when he's born, among other things. So there's no reason for us not to believe that the Masih ad-Dajjal will be a person. And so Imam al-Amriti, on verse 59, he begins, in speaking about commandments, he begins by saying, وَحَدُّهُ اسْتِدْعَاءُ فِعْلٍ وَاجِبِ بِالْقَوْلِ مِمَّنْ كَانَ دُونَ الطَّالِبِ. So the definition of a command, its definition is verbally demanding a mandatory act from someone who has a lesser status than the requester. So an amr, a commandment, is when a person of high rank requests something from an individual of lower rank. Right. And so if you have rank, so this is for one, we begin with that the idea that Islam is not anti-social hierarchy to begin with, that we're not against social hierarchy, that we believe in this, that it's not this idea of a society of lacking hierarchy, that hierarchy exists and Islam endorses it. And so the language endorses it. So I think it's not a commandment unless there is hierarchy does exist. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a status over everyone, right? So Allah asks us to do something that it is generally to be understood that it is something that we must fulfill. It is commandment we must fulfill. And that would mean as well that the zahir or the haqiqah of the amr is wujub. That is to say that the action which is being ordered is compulsory for us to fulfill. It's compulsory for us to fulfill. And remember what wajib means, compulsory means, it means that it's something, there's something, if you do it, if you fulfill it, you get reward, and if you abandon it, you are subject to punishment, right? And so that's fundamentally what it means. So, but the relationship between the commander and the commanded is one of hierarchy, that when one of a higher rank requests something of lower rank, then that's what we call a commandment. بصيغة تفعل في الوجوب حقيقها حيث قرينة تنتفت وأطلقها. Say on the paradigm. So it says its definition is verbally demanding a mandatory act from someone who has a lesser status than the requester. On the paradigm, if'al, incumbency is established when the context is severed and it is absolute. That is to say that in the Arabic language, the sigha, or the wording which is indicative of a commandment, and we study grammar, right? We call the fi'l al-amr, the fi'l al-madi, fi'l al-mudari', and fi'l al-amr. It is the basic form of if'al, right? So any word that comes in the form of if'al, if it's the first form, and we know the second form, the if'al, the fa'ala, right? Fa'il, third form, fa'il, and along all of the different scales, in the categories where we find a commandment, any word that comes on the form of a commandment is taken to be indicative that the thing being commanded is compulsory, right? That's our first assumption. Is that thing is to be compulsory. And this, what's interesting about this is with regard to Imam Juwayni himself, and followed by Imam Amriti in this regard, since he, of course, is simply just versifying Imam Juwayni's book, that Imam Juwayni, being a Shafi'i scholar, and so he adopts an opinion which is different than the popular view about the founder of the Shafi'i school. And it's said that Imam Shafi'i's opinion was that a commandment is indicative of the action. It indicates that the action being ordered is recommended for one to do, not compulsory for one to do. That we establish that something is compulsory through other means, right? But if you find a verb, right, mentioned with this sigha or this wording, this paradigm, if'al, if'alu, if'ala, right? Then it means that it's recommended to do the act. So there's two narrations. The one narration is that one from Imam Shafi'i, and then the other one is in agreement with the majority of scholars, the majority of linguists, which is that a command is to be assumed to indicate compulsoriness, right? And that's the other narration attributed to Imam Shafi'i, but it's the less popular of the two. And the Shafi'iyya, that they say Imam Shafi'i's opinion was that it's recommended, for the act. But Imam Juwayni himself takes the parts from this view and takes the opinion of the majority. And this is very common in all of the schools, that we find scholars in those schools, they all take an opinion which is contrary to the opinion of the founder of those particular schools. And then he says, لا مع دليل دلنا شرعا على إباحة في فعل أو ندب فلا. It is not accompanied by any indication that in terms of the Sharia, the action is merely permissible or recommended. That is to say that, again, pretty much what I just said, is that a command which is absolute, which is unqualified, right? It's like, for instance, an example of an unqualified command would be get married, right? Unqualified, get married. It doesn't say who to marry, it doesn't say how many to marry, right? If I say marry Khadija, right? Now it's qualified, right? So once it's qualified, then there's more room for speculation about the verb or the command not being taken literally. It could be taken according to another indication, perhaps recommendation, perhaps just simply neutrality. It could be just simple open sort of permissibility. And so, but when it's qualified, when it's qualified, this is what occurred. But when it's unqualified, we accept that perhaps the presumption is that it is indicative of obligation. لا مع دليل دلنا شرعا على إباحة في فعل أو ندب فلا بل صرفه عن الوجوب حتما بحمله على المراد منهما. Indeed, its removal from incumbency becomes certain when it's interpreted to mean either of the two. That is, that permissible or recommended, right? So we see it as absolute unqualified commandment, compulsory means something's wajib. The action's wajib for us to carry out. Because why? It's coming from one of higher rank to one of lower rank. Now, but when it's qualified, then, we can take some time and we can say, okay, well, maybe it might not be compulsory in this case because it now is being qualified. وَلَمْ يُفِدْ فَوْرًا وَلَا تِكْرَارًا إِلَّمْ يَرِدْ مَا يَقْتَضِي التَّكْرَارًا. It said, it does not indicate immediacy or repetition as long as it does not contain what necessitates repetition. So, for instance, after saying that a commandment, you see the commandment, a word comes on this form, that we assume that the thing being ordered is compulsory. It said, eat, drink, sit, stand, move, be still, whatever it may be. So it's absolute compulsory. If I do the opposite, then I'm going to be, subject to punishment. It's going to be sinful. But when it's qualified, It's something different. But then he moves on to the question of like, okay, if we've accepted that it is indicative that the action is compulsory. But a second question is that is it indicative that that the action must be repeated over and over and over and over and over, right, forever, right? And so there's some scholars who say yes, that a commandment يقتضي التكرار. الأمر يقتضي التكرار. It is indicative or necessitates repetition, right? That you have to do the action over and over and over. So if I tell you pray, right? Right? Then of course they're not saying that, you just spend 24 hours a day, every moment of your day praying, right? Because of course that lets you know that why this is not very much accepted. But then but then there are others who say, but no, it's not indicative of that. But say, for instance, our prayers. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Aqimu salat, establish the prayer. The Prophet ﷺ told us about the 5 prayers and different times of the day. So if Allah said, pray dhuhr, pray salatul dhuhr, does that mean that I have to pray it every single day? Or if I pray it, today, then have I fulfilled the commandment? So if I ask you to do something, right? If I say, push Aaron, right? Now, so Yusuf pushes Aaron one time, okay. Why you stop? Keep pushing them, right? Or now, once he pushes them one time, then he's fulfilled the commandment. So there's no reason for him to be subject to punishment. But some will say, okay, that until there's indication that you have to stop, then you stop, right? Find dalil. Give me dalil that you have to stop, right? Where the other view is that, well, no, that you have to give us dalil that he has to continue. So in our case, we know that we have to continue and pray dhuhr and asr and maghrib and all the other prayers every single day based upon the existence of evidence that lets us know that aqimu as-salat, right, is not just simply a very limited commandment for which we rid ourselves of obligation to fulfill it or repeat it just by doing it one time. And so he says, وَالْأَمْرُ بِالْفِعْلِ الْمُهِمِّ الْمُنْحَتِمِ أَمْرٌ بِهِ وَبِالَّذِي بِهِ يَتِمُ. The command for performing the important and definite act is a command both for it and that by means of which it is completed. So, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us to pray Salatul Subh, Salatul Fajr, right? That commandment means that we also have to perform wudu. We have to do everything which is compulsory in order to make the action valid. So a commandment to do a thing is also a commandment to do that by which will bring that act to completion. Right? And amr b'shay amrun bima la yatimmu ash-shay illa bihi. So if I order you to do something, I'm also ordering you to do anything else which is required in order for that commandment to become fulfilled. كالأمر بالصلاة أمر بالوضوء وكل شيء للصلاة يفرض. And pretty much the same thing I just said. Like the command to pray, which is also a command to make ablution, and everything else which is required for the performance of the prayer. So I have to make sure that my aura is covered, and make sure I face the qibla. So it's a commandment to do all those different things in my prayer. To stand when I pray, if I'm able to do so. وَحَيْثُمَا إِنْ جِيءَ بِالْمَطْلُوبِ يُخْرَجْ بِهِ عَنْ أُهْدَةِ الْوُجُوبِ. And whenever that which is commandment is performed, thereby the relevant obligation is discharged. Right? So you're ordered to do something, you fulfill it, then, alhamdulillah, you don't have to worry about anything else. It's all done. This is fulfilled. And remember, there's a difference between something being sahih, valid, meaning fulfilled, that the action has been fulfilled, and something being maqbool, something was accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because you have wudu, because you fulfill the requirements of the prayer, all of your arkan, all the fara'id, it doesn't necessarily mean that Allah has accepted the prayer from you. It means that you don't have to make it up. You don't have to repeat it. That's all it means. Allah might have accepted it, he might not have accepted it, right? And if a person doesn't fulfill those things, let's say, for instance, someone doesn't know and they pray, right? that we'll say that, yes, you have to pray over. Why? Because according to the source indications, certain things have to be fulfilled in order for your prayer to be valid. But Yom Al-Qiyamah, that person may come and find that Allah accepted their prayer. We don't know if Allah will not accept their prayer. We can just simply say that the prayer is batila. The prayer is invalid, meaning that the person has to repeat it based upon what we understand from the law. Remember, in jurisprudence, we're dealing with speculation. This is the area of near certainty, not certainty, certain knowledge. So unless Allah communicates to us directly, so-and-so's prayer hasn't been accepted, right? We can't really say it has been accepted, but we can say that it is not deemed to be valid. That's all. And there's a difference between the two. So that's the basic idea about commandments. And then we move on to the issue of prohibitions. And so he says, تعريفه استدعاء ترك قد وجب بالقول ممن كان دون من طلب. Its definition is verbally demanding an obligatory abandonment from someone who has a lesser status than the requester. Its definition is verbally demanding an obligatory abandonment from someone who has a lesser status than the requester. So just like in the case of the relationship between the one commanding you to do something, there's the same relationship between them and the person who is forbidding you from doing something as well. That, that the one of higher rank is telling you not to do something. لا تأكلوا الربا أضعافا مضاعفة. Do not devour interest, compound in compound form, among other things. وَذَرُوا مَا بَقِيَ مِنَ الرِّبَاءِ إِن كُنتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. Abandon what remains of riba if you truly believe. Right. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, of course, in this hierarchy, he's at the top, and the rest of us are below him. And so when Allah tells us to not do something, and if we do it in spite of being told not to do it, then we're sinful and we're subject to punishment. But if we comply, then we get reward. We get reward. So its definition is verbally demanding an obligatory abandonment from someone who has a lesser status than the requester. وأمرنا بشيء نحن مانع من ضده والعكس أيضا واقع. And our command of a thing is a prohibition negating its opposite. And the reverse also holds true. Right? So this is a principle. There's some dispute about it, but an amr b'shay' nahyun an ضده. That is when a commandment is given, it is understood to be a prohibition against doing the opposite of it as well. Right? وَالنَّهْيُ عَنْ الشَّيْءِ أَمْرٌ بِضِدِّهِ. And when a prohibition is made against something, it is also understood as a commandment to do the opposite of what has been prohibited. So for instance, if I tell you stand up, it means what? Don't sit down. If I tell you sit down, it means don't stand up. And of course, that is if we are correct about our assumption that standing and sitting are opposites. Okay. So we have to be clear about that as well. So if I say, because someone can sort of, disturb our sense of certainty by saying, okay, wouldn't to lie down also be the opposite of if I say, sit and then you lie down, right? Would that also be the opposite? Wouldn't that also be the opposite of sit as opposed to the opposite being stand up? Somebody may, inject that into the situation, into the equation, right? But again, it's important for us to understand that, be relatively certain that these things we call opposite are opposite. So if I tell you eat, it means what? What's the opposite of eat? Right? What? What's the opposite? Eat. How's the opposite of eat? Drink? Starve, right? Don't eat, right? Starve. Eat, don't eat, right? So some people may get drink, eat, and drink. They're opposites. They're not opposites. Drink is one thing, eat is another thing. So if I say eat, it means don't not eat, right? Don't not eat. If I say drink, is it don't not drink, right? Right? So those are opposites. So if I command you to do something, I'm also I'm forbidding you from doing the opposite of what I'm commanding you to do. If I forbid you from doing something, I'm ordering you to do the opposite of what I'm forbidding you from doing. La taqrabu zina. Do not come close to illicit intercourse, right? All right, what does it mean? The opposite of that, if I say don't come close to it, it means stay away from, be far away from it, right? La taqrabu, right? Mean ib'adu, be far from it, right? La taqrabu. So that's what that principle means. And not all the scholars are in agreement about it, but most of them accept it. وَصِيغَةُ الْأَمْرِ الَّتِي مَضَتْ تَرِدْ وَقَصْدُ مِنْهَا أَنْ يُبَاحَ مَا وُجِدْ. And the paradigm of the command mentioned earlier sometimes occurs with the intention of making illicit something that exists. So basically, it's to say that, yes, commandments, when we find a commandment and we find that the individual issuing the commandment or making the request is of a higher rank than ourselves, then we are to assume that we are to fulfill that commandment. So if our parents tell us to do something, right, then we understand that, yes, that there's an obligation. If Allah tells us to do something, there's an obligation involved there. If our governors tell us to do something, especially if it's not in disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then we understand that it's something that we are expected to fulfill. But at times, the commandments are simply taken to be authorization to do something, right? Like, for instance, in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَانْكِحُوا مَا طَابَ لَكُم مِّنَ النِّسَاءِ مَثْنَى وَثُلَاثَ وَرُبَاعَ. Marry, right, what is good to you, what appears good to you of women in twos, the threes, and fours, right? Two being two, three being three at two at one time, with three at one time, four at one time, right? So fankihu, right? Marry ma taba lakum, whatever is pleasing to you of women, right? Mathna wa thalatha wa ruba'. Is that command an obligation to marry more than one woman, right? Or is it simply an expression of the permissibility of doing so, right? Authorization to do so. Right, and then not just speaking, it says also when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking about marrying women from the people of the book. اليوم أحل لكم الطيبات وطعام الذين أوتوا الكتاب حل لكم وطعامهم حل لكم ومحصنات من المؤمنات ومحصنات من الذين أوتوا الكتاب من قبلكم. That the food of the people of the book is lawful to you. The chaste women from the people of the book are lawful for you as well. Now, saying that it is lawful, is it a recommendation? Is it compulsory? Right? So here we have to be very, very careful as well. That it's just because it's okay to do so. Like, for instance, it's okay to marry your cousins, right? It's lawful. But some people have like an American culture, it's creates this type of uneasiness in our culture to marry our cousins, right? So because I have this aversion, does it mean I hate the sunnah or I'm opposed to the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? No, it doesn't. It's because that particular commandment is just a commandment of permissibility. A commandment of permissibility. Same thing. Eating meat, right? Oh, the Prophet ate meat, right? We didn't meat all the time, but still, so like it's the sunnah. Yeah, it's the sunnah. It's the sunnah and fulfills the sunnah when it's done the way that he did it, right? And he didn't eat the meat 3 times a day, or 4 times a week. Or the Prophet ﷺ, most of the time he ate things like bread and oil and dates and water. That's what he's eating most of the time, right? And then there are celebrations. Eid comes up, he may eat meat among other things, But again, sometimes the commandment is just simply indicative of the permissibility of doing something. كما أتت والقصد منها التسوية كذلك تهديد وتكوين هي. Also, it came or it comes with the intention of making 2 alternatives equal. So, for instance, sometimes the commandment is indicative of what we call taswiyah, right? So, for instance, the Quran, اصبروا أو لا تصبروا سواء عليكم. Like, for instance, when Allah is addressing the people who go to hellfire, be patient or don't be patient. It's the same, for you, right? Be patient or don't be patient. Endure or don't endure. It's the same for you. No, it's not a commandment to do something, right? Allah's not telling them to do something. It's just basically saying, it's just making an expression. It's more like descriptive. Even it's not a prescription. It's like, it's beautiful, that's beautiful. Be patient, don't be patient. It's the same for you because in the zona ma kuntum ta'malun, you're only being rewarded for what you used to do. That's all. It's the same whether you're patient or you're not. Or it's for tahdeed. i'malu ma shi'tum. Do whatever you want. Do whatever you like. i'malu ma shi'tum. Inni bima ta'maluna basir. Inni bima ta'maluna muhit. Do whatever you want. It's not Allah giving permission to actually do whatever you want. It's a threat. It's like, i'malu ma shi'tum. Say, yeah, go ahead if you want to. Do it if you, go ahead. Go ahead and do it. Yeah. So, إِذَا لَمْ تَسْتَحِي فَاصْنَعْ مَا شِئْتَ. If you have no shame, do whatever you want. All right. Some of the scholars interpret that hadith as meaning it's a tahdeed, is a sort of a threat. It's like, well, I dare you to do it. I dare you. Right. So sometimes it is simply for that. Or we call tekween as well and also we call creation or Genesis. Like Allah said, kunu qiradatan khasi'in. So Allah told the children of Israel who violated the Sabbath, be apes. Right? Kunu is a command from kunu, be apes, khasi'in, who are despised. And so it's not telling them, it's not something they can willfully do anyway. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, kunu hadidan o hijaratan. So be iron or stone, right? It's just simply we call for tekween. So it's not always a something asking us to actually fulfill a commandment or a prohibition. And then he says, وَمُؤْمِنُونَ فِي خِطَابِ اللَّهِ قَدْ دَخَلُوا إِلَّا صَبِي وَالسَّاهِ. And the believers are included in the address of Allah, with the exception of the child and the forgetful. Or we would say the sahi is a little bit more than the forgetful. It's the non-attentive, the person who is not attentive, or a person who loses consciousness, among other things. So the sahi is a little bit more than just simply being forgetful. And so basically saying the believers are included in the address of God, meaning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he passes a judgment, when he says something is lawful, says something's unlawful, he tells us to do something, he forbids us from doing something, then it automatically applies to the believers. That the believers are fi khitabillah, al-mu'minuna fi khitabillahi, qad dakhalu illa sabi wa sahi. So those who are uqala, those people who are rational and mukallafun, people who are at the age of puberty, or people who are have reached majority. But it doesn't apply to the sabi, those who have not reached the age of puberty. That is to say that if they do something wrong, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not punish them for it. And then according to the majority of the scholars, if they do something good, Allah won't reward them either, because rufi al-qalam an thalath, an thalatha, that there are three people that the pen is lifted from. An sabi hatta yablugha, and one is from the child until he or she reaches puberty. وَعَنِ الْمَجْنُونِ حَتَّى يَفِيقَ. And from the insane person until they regain their sanity. Right? And so, and عَنِ النَّائِمِ حَتَّى يَسْتَيْقِظَ. And from the person who's asleep until he or she wakes up. Right? So the pen is lifted. Right? So while you're asleep, there's nothing recorded for or against you. While you are a child, nothing recorded for against the child. And the person insane, and nothing's recorded for or against that individual who does whatever they do in that particular state. وَذُو الْجُنُونِ كُلُّهُمْ لَمْ يَدْخُلُوا وَكَافِرُونَ فِي الْخِطَابِ دَخَلُوا فِي سَائِرِ الْفُرُوعِ لِلشَّرِيعَةِ وَفِي الَّذِي بِدُونِهِ مَمْنُوعًا. And the insane, all of them are not included. So the sabi, the sahi, so the child, the sleeper, and the insane person, and the unbelievers are included in the address of all the branches of Sharia. So coming to the issue, before I come to that, but just go back to these three categories. The person who sleeps, like for instance, there's a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said, مَنْ نَامَ عَنْ صَلَاتِ أَوْ نَسِيَهَا فَيُصَلِّهَا إِذَا ذَكَرَهَا, that whoever sleeps past the prayer or forgets it, all right, then let them pray it when they remember. Right? So that individual is not punished, that Allah will not reckon them for that. You just forgot, I forgot about Salatul Dhuhr. It's also, I forgot, right? And it's also now. Allah won't hold you accountable because it's based upon nisyan. إن الله تجاوز لي عن أمتي الخطأ والنسيان وما استكره عليه, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has overlooked for my ummah what they do out of error, what they do out of forgetfulness, and what they do out of compulsion, what they're compelled to do. And so that's with regard to those type of the people. And so the child as well will not be held accountable until they reach puberty. And so then he goes on to say, and the unbelievers are included in the address of all the branches of Sharia, and with respect to that without which the performances of the branches is impossible. And so here, what this particular issue is a point of dispute between the scholars. Most of them are in agreement with this particular position, saying that the non-Muslims are responsible for fulfilling the same commandments that are directed at the Muslims. So if Muslims are told they have to pray 5 times a day, non-Muslims are expected as well. If we're supposed to fast Ramadan, it's what non-Muslims are to fast Ramadan. Make the hajj, they have to make the hajj as well. Right? So all these things and all the other moral teachings, non-Muslims are expected to do them. And so, but then the ulama, the same ulama who take the view, they say that, yeah, they are called to do so, but a condition for the acceptance of those things is Islam. They have to first become Muslim. And so they can do it. So you can find a non-Muslim who may do all these things right now, but if they don't believe in Allah and His Messenger, it means nothing. Right? So they have to do the first thing, which will qualify them for acceptance, the acceptance of those deeds and the validation of those deeds, which is the acceptance of Islam. Right? And when they don't accept Islam, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will punish them. One of the reasons they're punished in hell forever is not only because their rejection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but also because of their abandonment of the obligations given to them, the furu' of the Sharia, these secondary practices. The other view is the view of Imam Abu Hanifa, which is that, no, non-Muslims are not expected to fulfill the same commandments or the same things that Muslims are expected to fulfill, besides the belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And they can reach that knowledge through reason, right? And they have that obligation to use their minds in order to reach that knowledge. But with regard to the furu', these practices of the religion, they're not held accountable. They're not held accountable, right? And so they would argue that, that the proof that they don't is that when they become Muslim, even those who say that they have to do these things, when they accept Islam, they're not told that they have to repeat what they've missed in their previous years, right? So the majority says, the reason why is a type of targheeb, is a type of encouragement to become Muslim, and so Allah forgives them. The tawheed, the acceptance of Islam and of Allah and the Messenger, that in itself removes the obligation, and then it cleans their slate. Whereas the Ahnaf say, that the very fact that they don't have to do it, it's not because of a way of encouragement, it's because they don't have to do it to even start with. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not directing the address to them to do these particular things. But the position of the majority is a very strong position, because in Surah Mudaththir, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in one particular instance, he's talking about people in the hellfire. He said that they're ma salakakum fi saqar. They're having a conversation, and one group says to the other, "What brought you into hell?" They said, "Qalu lam naku min al-musallin." We weren't among those who used to perform the prayer, the salah. Wa lam nakun nut'imu miskin, and we didn't feed the orphan, feed the poor. وَكُنَّا نَخُوضُ مَعَ خَائِدِينَ, and we used to sit and engage in vanities with those who engage with vanities. وَكُنَّا نُكَذِّبُ بِيَوْمِ الدِّينِ, and we used to reject, we didn't accept the day of judgment. حَتَّى أَتَانَا الْيَقِينَ, until certainty came to us, that is death. Right, so here, it says that they used to reject the day of judgment. So that's not the example of a believer, right? But before this, they say that one of the things that brought them into the fire was that not only that they didn't accept the day of judgment, it was also because they didn't pray, and they also didn't give charity. They didn't give zakat, right? And they used to be involved with ghiba and all these other things as well, right? So here, those verses actually strengthens the position of the majority, saying that the kuffar or the non-Muslims are also obliged to fulfill the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَذَلِكَ الْإِسْلَامُ فَفُرُوعُ تَصِحُهَا بِدُونِهِ مَمْنُوعُ. And that is Islam, acceptance of Islam. For the correct performance of the branches, without it is impossible. Right. So that's where we'll end today. So if there are any questions, any comments, inshallah, we can open up the floor to that, inshallah. Bismillah. Yes. About the what? Marriage. Yes. About the polygyny, the multiple wives. فإن خفتم ألا تقسطوا في اليتامى فانكحوا ما طاب لكم من النساء مثنى وثلاث ورباع وإن خفتم ألا تعدلوا فواحدة أو ما ملكت أيمانكم ذلك أدنى ألا تعولوا. All right. So it seems like in that command there's already war and right. Right, exactly, yeah. So remember that commandments have when they're qualified, this is where we can become involved with our sort of legal wrangling. So if it just said fankihu, right, get married, right, but then we say, hey, well, wujub, wajib, you have to get married. But then it goes on and says fankihu ma taba lakum min an-nisa'i, right, marry what is good to you, fair seeming to you of women, right. One qualification. Not to get married. It said basically marry those women that you think are good, right, or tayyibat, right. But then it says an additional qualification to give, mathna wa thulatha wa ruba', right? Or as two at one time, or three at one time, or four at one time, right? Right? But then it says, وَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تَعْدِلُوا فَوَاحِدَةً, right? And if you're fearful that you won't do justice, then one, right? Oh, ma malakat aymanukum, oh, what your right hands possess. And so here, that's the verse itself gives a number of qualifications, you see. So it begins, if we just focus only on the command itself, fankihu, right, get marry, right, then one judgment may result from that. But the very fact that there's more than that, more involved in it, gives us reason to believe that it may not be deemed as something compulsory to do. You see, then we can have a debate about, is it recommended to take more than one wife? Is it simply authority to take more than one wife, among other things? Does that help any? Okay, yeah. Okay, so I'll come to the question online. I'll read this one first. This one says, you mentioned that once a command is qualified, one has more room for speculation. Can you explain why this is in comparison to an unqualified command? Well, again, the issue when we look at an unqualified command, we're focusing on the relationship, first and foremost, between the commander and the one being commanded. So if it's a relationship of hierarchy, then the presumption is that the one being commanded is obligated to act, right? Because there's already a relationship of hierarchy, and it's understood that if one is of a higher rank than I am, then they have the right to command me, and I should expect to be commanded and deem myself subordinate to them in that particular regard. But once qualification occurs, right? So I mean, if I say to you, again, we go back to use push Aaron, or I say even more general, I say Yusuf, hit Aaron. Now, but if Yusuf, punches him in his head, right, or punches him in his foot, then it's like, okay. Or punches him in the stomach. I've been telling him exactly where to punch him, but he hit him somewhere. I didn't ask him how hard to hit him. He could just, tap or whatever, or he can, and have a nice little fight in here, But the idea is that once there's an additional condition added, then we get into this debate about how these type of things should be understood. Like in the Quran, when it's speaking about the authority of our parents, it says one thing says la taqul lahuma uff, don't say uff to them. And I just say not literally uff. Some little kids, I remember back when my daughter first learned this, she took it literally. She was like, I didn't say uff. I was like, oh man, I didn't say uff, But are we to understand from that is if I say don't say to them uff, that it's okay to hit them, right? Well, he didn't say don't hit them. He said just don't say uff. It's okay for me to kill my parents. He said don't say don't. Understand? So so once you qualify it. I mean, again, and that's what occurs, you see, in interpretation and exegesis, is that once you find these qualifications, you're going to find sometimes some khilaf, like disagreements scholars have. But when you leave it just focusing on the verb itself and the relationship between the two people involved, or the two personalities involved, or entities involved, then the assumption is that the one of lesser authority is expected to obey the one of higher authority, you see. Now, you said there was a question online? Mm-hmm. Right. Well, the first question about whether or not, for instance, like sort of a kleptomaniac or a person with a mental compulsion would be exempt from what they do when affected by those particular mental states, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for people in those states. That first and foremost, when we speak about compulsion, we're talking about when someone actually either physically forces us to do something, or they apply a type of pressure on us, psychological pressure on us, that leads us to actually do something that we would not normally do. So, for instance, if someone puts a gun to your head and tells you to give you your money, right, or for you to steal someone else's money and give it to them, something like that. And there's a disagreement about whether or not, if somebody threatens to kill you and say, I'll kill you if you don't kill the other person, scholars pretty much say, no, that's not valid. You can't kill someone because someone threatened to kill you, or rape someone because somebody threatened to kill you, or something like that. So, but the idea just simply, when you are doing something, when someone places a certain amount of pressure on you, and you to do something that you willfully would not have done, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would not hold you responsible for that. So, for instance, in the early period of Islam, when Muslims were persecuted, what they wanted them to recant their belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and so one particular instance where Sahabi actually recanted, and he went to the Prophet and he complained, and he said that they asked me to reject Allah, and I did so, because they were torturing me. And so the Prophet said to him, well, what about your heart? And he said, well, I believe in the God. At the time I didn't reject Allah in my heart. And so the Prophet told him, if it happens again, you do it again. So here is what I'm speaking about, or what the scholars are typically speaking about when they're talking about compulsion, like when you're actually forced to do something that people are torturing or things like that. And if you do something while being under duress or compelled in those ways, then that's what we're talking about. Now, if the kleptomania leaves an individual in such a state where they lose control of themselves, then when we're speaking about not being held responsible, we're not talking about legally responsible. There's a difference between we're talking about sort of morally responsible and legally responsible. The hadith is talking about people being morally responsible for what occurs in that state. But you can, in certain cases, an individual may be legally responsible in that they may be able to request some sort of indemnification. Say, for instance, you destroy somebody's property or something like that, or your child, who's perhaps has some mental disorder, and they do something, they can sue you or something like that for it. You say, but now with Allah doesn't consider it to be a sin. That's really what it means, that Allah removes the sinfulness of the act from you, but it doesn't mean that if you go out and you destroy someone's property, you kill someone, that the people who are responsible for you, your caretakers, cannot be, taken, sued or something of that sort. So that's what the two basic differences would be. You had a question related to that? You had something related to this question? I know there's another question online, right? Okay. It's different. Okay. So that's the first thing. So hopefully that provides enough information to help that person understand about the issue about kleptomania. But then the other question was related to a person who accepted Islam, and so the question is, like, does that person have to make up all the prayers that they didn't pray before they accepted Islam? Said no, they don't have to make up they accepted the prayers or anything like that. And that's one of the points of agreement between all of our scholars of the schools on these issues, is that on this particular issue, that as a convert to Islam is not required to make up those things. But a person who was born a Muslim, for instance, would be required to make up things that they abandoned, in their youth. You see, once they decide to correct their ways, amend their ways, and they would have to make up the things that the prayers that they made in the past and fast, among other things. Yes. It's related to this? Okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, if you don't know, the question was related to, like, if you don't know, for the sake of those who are online, question related to, like, for a person who grew up as a Muslim and doesn't know that they were supposed to pray five prayers a day, and so if they are they sinful for that part of the question, right? They're sinful for not making them up in spite of not knowing. And I say, no, they're not sinful, because you didn't know. And so those who were simple would be sinful in this case would be the parents for not teaching you, but it wouldn't apply to you. But not having knowledge of it would not exempt you from having to make them up. You still have to make them up because in spite of not knowing, you still have to fulfill those obligations. There's still obligations that apply to you as a Muslim, because once you are a Muslim, there's certain things you're supposed to do. But it's just that Allah will forgive what you didn't know. You see, if it was innocent and it was totally legitimate that you didn't know, then there shouldn't be a problem there, inshallah. Yeah, you still have to make it up. Yes, yes, I'm right. Right. So the question related to people with post-traumatic stress syndrome, like people in wars and things like that. A lot of people today who may suffer from certain psychological problems. Right. Well, you're talking about psycho-emotional. Right, talking about a temperament issue of people, brought upon by, traumatic events, and so naturally people in those states are a bit more agitated than usual. One thing that a lot of our scholars of ihsan, of suluk, that they mention, and I do remember that in particular, like Imam Abu Hassan Mawardi. This is one thing he talks about in his Adab al-Dunya with Deen. He mentions the importance of us of being very sensitive about our states and other states. So, for instance, he talks about how when you're hungry, there's a certain state you're in. When you're tired, there's a certain type of psycho-emotional state you're in. When your old people are old, right, there's a certain psycho-emotional state that they're in, and so in those particular states, people have a tendency to react or overreact, right? And so we have to, ourselves be very much acquainted with our own states, so that we don't overreact, but also at the same time try ourselves to be present about other people's states, so that when they do react that way, that we can be tolerant and be patient with them. I wouldn't characterize that as necessarily insanity or equal to insanity. Now, it is possible that, I think it is possible, I'm not a specialist on this, but like it is definitely believed to be possible in jurisprudence, in the classical jurisprudence, that a person can get so angry that they sort of reach the point of insanity. And so that is a different case altogether. So when we start talking about sanity or insanity, we're talking about whether or not the individual knows or is able to distinguish between reality and that which is not reality, right? And so when people can't distinguish between the two, then that person is insane. Then that individual, is not held accountable with Allah for what occurs during those particular states. The person knows right from wrong, and this is why in criminal investigations, often in trials, that's definitely what they're looking. They're trying to discover if the individual knew what he or she was doing at the time when they carried out a crime. You see, so that they could make the right determination about their guilt or innocence. Yes. Well, there is the concept of restorative justice that exists, especially very popular here in these part of the country. I like restorative justice models for certain types of crimes, especially, and so what happens in restorative justice often is that the victim and the victimizer, as they're encouraged to come together and have a conversation about what happened, and what leading up to the crime, the commission of the crime, so that they can understand how each was impacted by the other person's action or inaction. And what happens too is that what's being encouraged is that for people to develop recommendation on what the punishment for the crime would be, but together that the victim actually plays a part in determining the punishment of the victimizer, but after having this conversation about, okay, well, that I was, I came from a broken family. At that time, I didn't have a job. I just got kicked out. I got evicted from my house. And so, and so the victim actually might develop a certain amount of empathy for them, but then the victim as well tells, because of what you did, I lost this, lost my job, I lost my ability to, and so there's a certain amount of remorse, additional remorse that comes to the victimizers, for them to understand the impact that they have on the lives of others. So that is a particular model. It's not a perfect model, because you can't rapist and is the one he rapes. It's not going to work. You bring well, I wasn't feeling too good that day. I don't know, felt like going to rape somebody. I had some problems in my life, so I just saw you. I don't. It doesn't work. But in a certain crimes, it does have an impact. But what's important in all of it is that people that people, if they know what they're doing, then they're not considered to be insane, right? I'm sorry, Adi, you had something last, or you just wanted to tell me time's up? uh-huh. All right, so the first question about a person who is not praying regularly but then goes to pray the Kuf to Umrah or Hajj, that the Prophet ﷺ in the hadith he mentions, he says that al-hajj mabrur laysa lahu jaza'un la jannah, that the hajj, which is considered to be mabrur, called mabrur, accepted or righteous hajj, has no reward other than Jannah. But that reward, the mabrur or the bir, that is it is necessary in order for the hajj to be accepted, is one has to avoid major sins, for one, right? And then secondly, they have to be in fulfillment of the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you don't pray on a regular basis, and especially if you're not praying on the hajj, right, then there's no point of you performing the hajj, or expecting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive you if your intention is not to continue to fulfill the normal commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's what people need to know about that much. The other question was what? What was it, the last part of the question? Or is it part of being Muslim to read the whole Quran? Well, yes and no. It is not a condition to be a Muslim in order for you to read the entire Quran. But if you are a Muslim, if you haven't read the entire Quran, then I would, that's, you understand? I think it's sort of a problem, if we haven't at least tried to read the entire Quran, to know what the Quran has to say. It is our book of guidance. It is the source of the connection between ourselves and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We want to know what Allah says, study the Quran. But the condition, is a condition for Islam? No, it's not a condition for your Islam. And but we should read as much of the Quran as we possibly can. So I appreciate that, and appreciate the questions, and look forward to seeing you next time. I'm not sure if we're going to have class next Saturday. I don't know. I guess announcement will come out. I know that Eid is coming up. Some people are having Eid on Saturday, and then others will be on Sunday, and So later on, I believe an announcement probably will be coming out to let you know if we're going to be meeting again next week, inshallah. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا وسبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. آمين. السلام عليكم.